here at Forest Home. Staying in this cool house. Okay. Alrighty, well, we are at Forest Home visiting, and let's see if I can go like this to shine a little bit of light on my face for a little bit. Hopefully it looks nice and creepy. We are at Forest Home Christian Camp. This is where my wife and I met. It's also the place where the guy who recommended this book works. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I happened to ask him earlier this month about who inspired him and what books he would recommend, and this is the one that he recommended, and now we're gonna read this book. This is my second video that I've done with this book. The first, I was sitting in my house and I thought it was fun. There we go. A big reason that I'm actually reading this book right now is because the power went out. So there's really nothing left to do except for read. Seemed like good a thing as any. When I stopped before, I finished part 1, and now I'm on to part 2. Yep, I finished part 1 and now we're on to part 2. But part 2 lasts from page 27 until page 115, so kind of don't think we're going to knock out part 2 in one shot, but we'll see how this goes. Last time I read about the staff, from what I remember, there was an older gal that got hired at a company. It's a technology company of some sort. And that's kind of all that I remember. So here we go. Part 2, Lighting the Fire. First Test is the title of this first section of part 2. It looked like just another of many standard email messages that Catherine was receiving on a regular basis now that she had been on the job for a while. The subject header, customer opportunity next week, seemed innocuous enough, even positive, especially considering that it came from her Carib chief engineer Martin. And the note itself was short. The most damaging ones usually are. That it was not addressed to anyone in particular, but was sent to the entire executive staff, only bellied its sedentary potential. Man, I'm really bad at reading. Just received a call from ASA Manufacturing. They're interested in reviewing our product to consider a purchase next quarter. JR and I will be going down to meet with them next week. Could be a big opportunity. We'll be back early Tuesday. The fact that Martin avoided any mention of the scheduling conflict with the executive retreat only made the situation worse for Catherine. He had not asked permission to miss the first day and a half of an off-site retreat either, because he didn't feel the need to do so or because he wanted to avoid having to deal with the issue altogether. Catherine decided it didn't matter which was true. She resisted the temptation to avoid a confrontation with Martin by firing off an email reply. Catherine decided that it would be her first moment of truth as CEO, and moments of truth, she knew, are best handled face to face. Catherine found Martin sitting in his corner office reading email. His back was turned toward the open door, but she didn't bother knocking. "Excuse me, Martin." Catherine waited for Martin to turn around, which he took his time doing. "I just saw your email about ASA." He nodded, and she went on. "That's great news, but we'll have to push the appointment back a few days because of the off-site." Martin was silent for an awkward moment, then responded without emotion, but with his thickest English accent. "I don't think you understand. This is a potential sales opportunity. You don't just reschedule." Catherine interrupted and responded matter-of-factly. "No, I do understand, but I think they'll still be there next week." Not used to being countered directly, Martin became slightly agitated. "If your concern is about this Napa off-site thing, then I think we may have our priorities confused. We need to be out there selling." Catherine took a breath and smiled to conceal her frustration. "First of all, I only have one priority at this point. We need to get our act together as a team, or we're not going to be selling anything." Martin said nothing. After an awkward 5 seconds, Catherine finished the conversation. "So I'll be seeing you in Napa next week." She turned to leave and then turned back to face Martin again. "Oh, and if you need any help rescheduling the ASA meeting, let me know. I know Bob Tennyson, the CEO down there. He sits on the Trinity board with me, and he owes me a favor." With that, she left the room. Though Martin decided not to push any further for the moment, he was not through fighting. Jeff stopped by Catherine's office the next morning and asked her to lunch. She had planned to run an errand during that time, but happily shifted her schedule to accommodate one of her direct reports. The oldest Mexican restaurant in Half Moon Bay was as good a spot as any for a difficult conversation, he thought, because mostly locals ate there. Before Jeff could broach the topic he wanted to discuss, Catherine took care of some business of her own. "Jeff, I want to thank you for leading the executive staff meetings these past 2 weeks. It's allowed me to sit back and observe." He nodded politely to accept her minor but heartfelt gratitude. She continued, "After next week's off-site, I'll take over. But I want you to know that you shouldn't hold back during the meetings. You should participate as fully as any other staff member." Jeff nodded. "Fine. I don't think that will be a problem." He paused, then worked up the courage to raise the issue that had provoked the lunch invitation. Straightening his silverware nervously, he began. "Now that you mention the off-site, I'd like to ask you a question." "Go ahead." Catherine was almost amused. "Go ahead." Catherine was almost amused by Jeff's discomfort, and because she had anticipated the question about her run-in with Martin, she was calm and confident. "Well, yesterday on the way out of the office, I talked to Martin in the parking lot." He waited, hoping Catherine would jump in and move the conversation forward from there. She didn't, so Jeff continued. "Well, he said something to me about the ASA meeting and the off-site scheduling problem." Again, Jeff paused, hoping for his new boss to mercifully interrupt. This time she did, but only to prompt him to continue. "Yes?" Jeff swallowed. "Well, he believes, and frankly I think I agree with him, that a customer meeting is more important than an internal one. And so, if he and JR missed the first day or so of the off-site, I think it would be okay." Catherine chose her words carefully. "Jeff, I understand your opinion, and I'm fine with your disagreement with me, especially when you tell me face to face." Jeff was noticeably relieved for the moment. "However, I was hired to make this organization work, and right now it doesn't." Jeff looked like he was trying to decide whether to be humbled or angry, so Catherine clarified, I'm not trying to criticize what you've done so far, because it seems to me that no one cares more about the company than you do. His ego now assuaged, I don't know what that word means, I'm assuming calmed down. Catherine drove the point home. But from a team standpoint, we are completely broken. And one sales meeting is not going to have a meaningful impact on our future, at least not until we straighten out the leadership problem around here. Not knowing Catherine very well, Jeff decided that any further debate would be fruitless and possibly career limiting. He nodded as if to say, okay, I guess it's your call. The two of them engaged in small talk and ate one of the fastest lunch in Half Moon Bay history before heading back to the office. The conversation with Jeff had not fazed Catherine. This is the next little chapter section. Drawing the line is what this one's called. The conversation with Jeff had not fazed Catherine. She had certainly expected some backlash about the Martin incident from her inherited staff, but she didn't expect it to come from the chairman. When he reached her at home that evening, she initially assumed he was calling to give her support. I just got off the phone with Jeff, he announced in a friendly tone. So I guess you heard about my headbutt with Martin. Let me see. I'm a little bit confused. Who was it that she was talking to? She was talking to Jeff. Okay, Martin must have called her. I just got off the phone with Jeff, he announced in a friendly tone. So I guess you heard about my headbutt with Martin. I don't know what is going on. The conversation, she certainly expected some backlash about Martin incident from her inherited staff, but she didn't expect it to come from the chairman. When he reached her at home that evening, I don't know who the chairman is. The chairman of the board? So I guess you heard about my headbutt with Martin. Catherine humorously and confident attitude pushed the chairman into a more serious mood. Yes, and I'm a little bit concerned. Catherine was caught off guard. You are? Look, Catherine, you know I don't want to tell you how to go about doing this, but maybe you should try to build a few bridges over there before you start setting any on fire. Catherine let a few moments pass before replying. As surprised as she was by the chairman's concerns, she was remarkably calm and shifted into CEO mode immediately. Okay, what I'm about to say is not meant in any way to be defensive or rude. I know that, Catherine. Good, because I'm not going to mince my words, not with you, and I appreciate that. You may not after you hear what I have to say. He forced a laugh. Okay, I'm sitting down. First, don't think that I am just randomly setting fires to get my kicks. I've been watching these people carefully for the past 2 weeks, and everything I'm doing and everything I'm about to do is purposeful and intentional. I didn't tweak Martin because I felt it in the moment. I know, it's just that Catherine interrupted politely. Hear me out. This is important. Okay, go ahead. Now, if you knew how to do what I'm trying to do, you wouldn't need me. Am I right? You're right. You see, I honestly appreciate your concern for the company and for me, and I know that you mean well on both counts. But based on this call, I'd have to say that your good intentions are hurting the company more than helping it. I'm sorry, but I'm not understanding you. Catherine went on. Well, over the past 18 months, you have been fairly active with Jeff and the rest of the team, more so than most board chairmans. And you've watched this team spiral further and further into dysfunction and chaos. And now you've asked me to help you put them out of it. Isn't that what you want? Absolutely, that's exactly what I want. Then I have a single question for you. Are you prepared for the consequences of letting me do this right? Now don't answer right away. She caught him just as the words were coming out of his mouth. Think about it for a second. She let the question sit there before continuing. This is not going to be easy or pretty, not for the company, not for the executives, not for me, and not for you. The chairman remained silent, resisting the temptation to assure her that he was prepared to do whatever she needed. Catherine interrupted his silence as permission to continue her pointed lecture. You've probably heard my husband saying that a fractured team is just like a broken arm or leg. Fixing it is always painful, and sometimes you have to re-break it to make it heal correctly. And the re-break hurts a lot more than the initial break because you have to do it on purpose. After a long pause, the chairman spoke. Okay, Catherine, I hear you. Do whatever you have to do. I won't get in the way. Catherine could tell that he meant it. Then he asked, but I do have one final question. How much of this team are you going to have to re-break? I should know by the end of this month. Napa is the next section. We'll call them sections until I come up with a better name. Catherine chose the Napa Valley for the offsite because it was close enough to the office to avoid expensive and time-consuming travel, but just far enough to feel out of town. And regardless of how many times people have been there, it always seemed to make them slow down a pace or two. The hotel where the meeting would take place was in a small inn located in the town of Yountville. Catherine liked it because it was reasonably priced during the off-season and had just one large, comfortable conference room. It was on the second floor, had its own balcony, and overlooked acres of vineyards. The meeting was to start at 9 a.m., which meant that most of the team would have to leave their homes fairly early in the morning to arrive on time. By 8:45, everyone had arrived, checked their luggage at the front desk, and was seated in the conference table. Everyone but Martin, that is. Though no one said anything about him, the way they were checking their watches suggested they were all wondering whether he would be on time. Even Catherine seemed a bit nervous. She didn't want the first activity of the meeting to be a reprimand of someone for being late. Then for a split second, she felt a flash of panic, wondering what she would do if he just didn't show up at all. She couldn't very well fire him for not coming to a meeting, could she? Did she have that kind of political capital with the board? How valuable is this guy anyways? When Martin came through the door at 8:59, Catherine breathed in an inaudible sigh of relief and chastised herself for worrying so much. She took comfort in knowing that she was finally about to begin what she had been waiting to do for almost a month. And as concerned as she was about the attitudes of the people sitting around the table, Catherine could not deny that moments like this were a big part of why she loved being a leader. Very exciting. Martin took the only remaining chair at the end of the conference table opposite Catherine. As soon as he sat down, he removed his laptop computer from its case and put it on the table in front of him, leaving it closed for the moment. Determined not to be distracted, Catherine smiled at her staff and addressed them calmly and gracefully. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start the day by saying a few words, and this won't be the last time I say them. No one knew just how serious Catherine was about that remark. We have a more experienced and talented executive team than any of our competitors. We have more cash than they do. Thanks to Martin and his team, we have better core technology, and we have a more powerful board of directors. Yet in spite of all that, we are behind two of our competitors in terms of both revenue and customer growth. Can anyone here tell me why that is? Silence. Catherine continued, still as warmly as when she started. After interviewing with every member of our board and spending time with each of you, and then talking to most of our employees, it's very clear to me that what our problem is. She paused before completing the thought. We are not functioning as a team. In fact, we are quite dysfunctional. A few of the staff members shot glances toward Jeff to see how he would react. He seemed fine, but Catherine picked up on the tension. I'm not saying this to call out Jeff or anyone else in particular. It's just a fact. One that we are going to begin addressing over the next 2 days. And yes, I know how ridiculous and unbelievable it feels to you to be out of the office for so many days this month. But by the end of it all, everyone who is still here will understand why this is so important. That last comment got everyone's attention. That's right. I want to say right up front that Decision Tech is going to experience some changes during the next few months, and it is very possible that some of us here won't find the new company to be the kind of place where we want to be. That isn't a threat or a dramatic device. I don't have anyone in particular in mind. It is just a realistic probability, and it's nothing to be in denial about. All of us are eminently employable, and it wouldn't be the end of the world for anyone to leave if that is the right thing for the company and the team. Catherine stood and went to the whiteboard, careful not to come across as arrogant or condescending. Let me assure those of you who might be wondering about all of this that everything we are going to be doing is about one thing only: making this company succeed. That's all. We're not going to be catching each other falling out of trees. A few of the staff members chuckled. And we certainly won't be holding hands, singing songs, or getting naked. Even Martin managed to smile while the others laughed out loud. I want to assure you that there is only one reason that we are here at this offsite and at the company: to achieve results. This, in my opinion, is the only true measure of a team, and it will be the focus of everything we do today. And as long as I'm here, in my opinion, is the only true measure of a team and will be the focus of everything we do today and as long as I am here. It is my expectation that next year and the year after, we will be able to look back on revenue growth, profitability, customer retention, and satisfaction, and if the market is right for it, maybe even an IPO. But I can promise you that none of that will happen if we do not address the issues that are preventing us from acting like a team. Catherine paused to let everyone digest the simplicity of her message and then continued. So how do we go about this? Over the years, I've come to the conclusion that there are 5 reasons why teams are dysfunctional. Then she drew a triangle on the whiteboard and divided it with 4 horizontal lines, creating 5 separate sections. Catherine turned back to the group. Over the course of the next 2 days, we are going to be filling out this model and dealing with each issue one at a time. And you'll notice immediately Sorry, I probably will stop reading when someone comes, at least stop reading on camera when someone comes, because I don't really want to explain to any new people what I'm doing until I'm not in the middle of doing it. So I thought I saw a car pulling up, but it wasn't. So right now I'd like to start with the first dysfunction. And you'll notice immediately that none of this is rocket science. In fact, it will seem remarkably simple on paper. The tricky part is putting it into practice. Right now, I'd like to start with the first dysfunction, absent of trust. She turned and wrote the phrase on the bottom of the triangle. The staff members read the words silently, and most of them frowned as if to say, "Is that all you've got?" Catherine was used to this and continued, "Trust me, this is the foundation of real teamwork." And so the first dysfunction is failure on the part of the team members to understand and open up to one another. And if that sounds touchy-feely, let me explain, because there is nothing soft about it. It is an absolutely critical part of building a team. In fact, it's probably the most crucial. Some of the people in the room were clearly in need of an explanation. "Great teams do not hold back with one another," she said. "They are unafraid to air their dirty laundry. They admit their mistakes, their weaknesses, their concerns without fear of reprisal." Most of the staff seemed to be accepting the point, but without a lot of enthusiasm. Catherine pushed on. "The fact is, we don't trust one another, and it seems to me that we don't. Sorry, the fact is, if we don't trust one another, and it seems to me that we don't, then we cannot be the kind of team that is ultimately achieves results. And so this is where we are going to focus first." The room was silent until Jan raised her hand. Catherine smiled. "I may have been a school teacher once, but you don't have to raise your hand to talk. Feel free to jump in anytime." Jan nodded and asked her question. "I'm not trying to be negative or contradictory here, but I'm just wondering why you don't think we trust each other. Is it possible that you just don't know us very well yet?" Catherine paused to consider the question, wanting to give a thoughtful answer. "Well, my assessment is based on quite a bit of data, Jan. Specific comments from the board employees and many of you." Jan seemed content with the answer, but Catherine decided to continue. "But I'd have to say that the more than anything I've been told by others, I see a trust problem here in the lack of debate that exists during staff meetings and other interactions among this team. But I don't want to get ahead of myself because that's a separate part of the model entirely." Nick was not about to let it go. "But that doesn't always mean that there's an absence of trust, does it?" The question was more of a statement than anything else. Everyone in the room, including Martin and Mikey, seemed eager for Catherine's response. "No, not necessarily, I guess." Nick was momentarily pleased that his comment was deemed to be correct, until Catherine clarified. "Theoretically, if everyone is completely on the same page and working in lockstep towards the same goal with no sense of confusion, then I suppose that a lack of debate might be a good sign." More than one of her staff members began to smile sheepishly at the description that certainly did not apply to them. Nick's satisfaction disappeared. Catherine continued to be direct in her explanation towards him. "But I'd have to say that every effective team I've ever observed had a substantial level of debate. Even the most trusting teams mixed it up a lot." Now she directed a question to the rest of the room. "Why do you suppose there is so little passionate discussion or debate among this group?" At first no one answered, and Catherine let them sit in the uncomfortable silence. Then Mikey mumbled something under his breath. "I'm sorry, Mikey, I didn't hear you." Catherine did her best to conceal her distaste for sarcastic remarks, which she had developed teaching 7th graders. Catherine doesn't like snide remarks. Mikey clarified louder. "There isn't enough time, I think. We're all too busy to have lengthy debates about minor issues. We're drowning in work as it is." Catherine sensed that the others might not agree with Mikey, but she wondered if anyone dared challenge her. She was about to do so herself when Jeff offered tentatively, "I'm not sure I'm with you on that one, Mikey. I don't think we lack the time to argue. I think we're just not comfortable challenging each other, and I'm not sure why." Mikey responded quickly, if not sharply, Maybe because our meetings are always too structured and boring. The mother and Catherine wanted to step in and protect Jeff, partially to reward him for having stood up to Mikey, but she decided to let things go. After a pause, Carlos chimed in gently without directing his comment at Mikey, as though the entire group had made the remark. Now wait a minute, everyone. I agree that the meetings have been pretty dull and that the agenda is usually a little too full, but I think we could have challenged each other more. We certainly don't all agree on everything. Nick spoke up. I don't think we agree on anything. They all laughed except Martin, who had opened his laptop and turned it on. Catherine joined the livening conversation. So you don't agree on most things, and yet you don't seem willing to admit that you have concerns. Now, I'm no PhD in psychology, but that's a trust issue if I've ever heard one. A few of the heads in the room actually nodded in agreement with Catherine, something she appreciated, like a starving person giving a few morsels of bread. And then the typing sound began. Martin, now completely checked out of the conversation, was banging away on his keyboard like, well, a computer programmer. Distracted by the sound, everyone in the room glanced at Martin for a nanosecond, and this was enough to kill whatever momentum the conversation had generated. Catherine had both relished this moment and dreaded it from the first staff meeting she had observed, and as much as she wanted to avoid another run-in with Martin, especially so early in the day, she would not let the opportunity pass her. Entertaining the danger is the next section. I'm gonna do a little something real quick. Get a little shot of the sky. Oh, look, you can see a star out there. That's exciting. It's very cool that you can see that in the video. Well, the power's out because there's a fire, and we are kind of stuck. Let's see if I can. Alrighty, folks, there we go. Okay, well, continuing on. There's a fire up on the mountain right now, and that's why the power's out. I'm hoping that it comes back on today, but if it doesn't, what can we do? It'll all be okay. So, entering the danger. The tension in the room began to mount as Catherine watched Martin type away at the other end of the table. No one really thought she would say anything, but they didn't know Catherine very well. Excuse me, Martin. Martin finished typing and then looked up to acknowledge his boss. Are you working on something? Catherine's question was sincere without even a hint of sarcasm. The room froze, waiting anxiously for the answer to the question that they had been wanting to ask for the past 2 years. Martin seemed as though he wasn't going to respond at all, then said, I'm taking notes, actually, and continued typing. Catherine remained calm and continued to speak in a measured tone. I think this is a good time to talk about ground rules for the off-site and for our meetings going forward. Martin looked up from his computer, and Catherine continued, directing her comments to the entire group. I don't have a lot of rules when it comes to meetings, but there are a few that I'm a stickler about. Everyone waited for her to begin. Basically, I want you to do 2 things: be present and participate. That means everyone needs to be fully engaged in whatever we're talking about. Even Martin knew when to pull back a little. He asked a question, but in a slight conciliatory tone that the group was not accustomed to hearing from their chief scientist. What about when the conversation is not relevant to everyone? Sometimes it seems that we talk about issues that would best be handled offline, one-on-one. That's a good point. Catherine was reeling Martin in now. If there is ever a time when that happens, when we think that we are wasting the group's time by dealing with issues that should be dealt with outside the meeting, then everyone here should feel free to speak up. Martin seemed pleased that she had agreed with him. Catherine went on, but for everyone else, I want everyone fully engaged. But for everything else, I want everyone fully engaged. And while I understand that some people prefer to use a computer rather than a notebook like you, Martin, I've found that it's too distracting. It's easy to imagine the person sitting there checking their email or working on something else. Mikey decided to come to Martin's aid, something he didn't want or need. Catherine, with all due respect, you haven't worked with the high-tech culture, and this is pretty common in software companies. I mean, maybe not in the automotive world, but Catherine interrupted politely. Actually, this is very common in the automotive world. I had the same issue there. It's more of a behavioral issue than a technological one. Jeff nodded and smiled as if to say, good answer. And with that, Martin closed his laptop, put it in his computer case. More than one of the staff members looked at Catherine as if she had just talked a bank robber into handing over his gun. If only the rest of the day would be so easy. I'm enjoying the book so far. I'm not really much for fiction, I don't think, but I'm having a good time. So the next section is called Getting Naked. Catherine knew that she was about to begin a deceptively critical part of the session, one that would give her clues as to how things might unfold during the months ahead. It was no accident that it was the first real exercise on the agenda. Before we get into any heavy lifting, let's start with something that I call personal histories. Catherine explained that everyone would answer 5 non-intrusive personal questions having to do with their backgrounds, and she ended her instructions with a humorous caveat that even Martin seemed to appreciate. Remember, I want to hear about your life as a child, but I'm not interested in your inner child. One by one, the decision tech executives answered the question: hometown, number of kids in the family, interesting childhood hobbies, biggest challenge growing up, first job. Almost to a person, every set of answers contained a gem or two that few, if any, of the other executives knew. Carlos was the oldest of 9 kids. Mikey studied ballet and Juilliard School in New York. I forgot Mikey was a girl. Mickey, I guess it's probably Mickey. I forgot Mickey was a girl. Jeff had been a bat boy for the Boston Red Sox. Martin spent much of his childhood in India. JR had an identical twin brother. Jan was a military brat. During the discussion, Nick even discovered that he had played basketball in high school against the team coached by Catherine's husband. As for Catherine, her staff seemed most surprised and impressed not by her military training or automotive experience, but by the fact that she had been an All-American volleyball player in college. It was really quite amazing. After just 45 minutes of extremely mild personal disclosure, the team seemed tighter and more at ease with each other than at any time during the past year. But Catherine had been through this enough to know that the euphoria would diminish as soon as the conversation shifted to work. Next section, going deeper, page 54. Let's see what happens if I go like this. Well, that's kind of better. It's kind of more exciting. It's hard to tell. I don't know. When the team returned from a short break, it was clear that they had already lost some of the glow from the morning's session. They spent the next several hours working through lunch, reviewing their individual behavioral tendencies according to a variety of diagnostic tools that they had completed before coming to Napa. One of these was the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. Catherine was pleasantly surprised that even Martin seemed to be engaged in the discussion, but then again she reasoned everyone likes to learn about and talk about themselves, until the criticism comes, that is, and that was about to come. But Catherine decided that late afternoon was a bad time to dive into the next phase, given everyone's energy level. So she gave them a break for a few hours in the afternoon to check email, exercise, or do whatever else they wanted. Catherine knew they would be working late that night, and she didn't want them to get burnt out too early. Martin spent most of the afternoon break reading email in his room. Nick, Jeff, and Carlos and JR played bocce ball on the court next to the hotel. Catherine and Jan met in the lobby to talk about budgets. Mikey sat by the pool and read a novel. When they returned around dinner time, Catherine was pleased to see them pick up the conversation where it had ended earlier. But now everyone had acknowledged their different interpersonal styles at work and discussed the implications of being an introvert versus an extrovert and other similar qualities. They were all definitely loosening up. People were eating pizza and beer, which made everything seem less threatening. Suddenly, Carlos was teasing Jan for being too anal, while Jeff razzed JR for being unfocused. Even Martin responded well when Nick called him a raging introvert. No one at the table was fazed by the good-natured but substantive ribbing, with the exception of Mickey. It wasn't that she took their teasing badly. Worse yet, no one teased her at all. In fact, they made no comments about her, and unsurprisingly, she made almost none about them. Catherine wanted to bring her into the process, but decided not to be too aggressive so soon. Things were going well, better than she had expected. The team seemed willing to talk about some of the dysfunctional behaviors that Catherine had observed during staff meetings. There was no need to create a controversy on the first night, especially after already having dodged a few bullets with Martin. But some things cannot be controlled, and Mickey herself opened up the door to her own issues. When Nick remarked to the group that he found the personality descriptions to be amazingly accurate and helpful, Mickey did what she so often did during staff meetings. She rolled her eyes. Catherine was just about to call her out on her behavior when Nick beat her to it. What was that all about? Mickey reacted as though she had no idea what he was referring to. What? Nick was mostly teasing her, but he was clearly a little annoyed. Come on, you rolled your eyes. Did I say something stupid? She persisted in the feigning ignorance. No, I didn't say anything. Now Jan jumped in, but gently. You didn't have to say anything, Mickey. It was the look on your face. Jan wanted to diffuse the situation by helping Mickey fess up without losing face. Sometimes I think that you don't even know you're doing it. But Mickey wouldn't bite. She was beginning to get ever so slightly defensive. I really don't know what you're talking about. Nick couldn't hold back. Come on, you do it all the time. It's like you think we're all idiots. Catherine made a mental note not to have beer brought with dinner next time, but she couldn't deny being glad that things were coming to the surface. She took a bite of pizza and watched with everyone else, resisting the temptation to make artificial peace. Out of nowhere, Mickey responded, Listen, you guys, I'm not into all this psychobabble. I don't think any of our competitors who have been kicking our asses right now are sitting around a hotel in Napa talking about where they get their energy or how they see the world. The room was caught off guard by the indictment of the entire process. I don't know that word. Indictment of the entire process, which they seemed to be enjoying, and looked to Catherine to see how she would respond. But Martin beat her to it. Yeah, you're right. People were shocked that Martin, who seemed engaged in the process, was defending Mickey until he completed the punch of his remarks. They're probably in Carmel. Had anyone else said it, the room would have chuckled, but coming from Martin, directed at Mickey in his dry, sarcastic accent, it made everyone howl, except, of course, Mickey, who just sat there smiling painfully. I thought it was pretty funny. For a moment, Catherine thought her marketing VP would walk out. That might have been better than what she did. For the next 90 minutes, Mickey didn't say a word, but sat silently as the group continued their discussion. Eventually, the topic naturally drifted toward more tactical topics related to the business. Jan interrupted the conversation and asked Catherine, "Are we getting off track here?" Catherine shook her head. "No, I think it's good that we dive into operational issues while we're thinking about behavioral stuff. It gives us a chance to see how we put this into action." As happy as Catherine was to be by the interaction that was taking place among the rest of the team, she couldn't overlook the fact that Mickey's behavior was speaking volumes about her inability to trust her teammates. Poolside. Catherine called the session to an end a little after 10 p.m. And with the exception of Jan and Nick, who had just begun an impromptu budget discussion, the team headed to bed. Mickey and Catherine's room were near the pool at the small hotel complex, and as they walked to their rooms, Catherine decided to see if she could make some progress one-on-one. "You okay?" Catherine was careful not to be too dramatic or maternal. "I'm fine." Mickey wasn't faking very well. "I know this is a difficult process, and you might feel like they were a little tough on you." "A little? Listen, I don't let people make fun of me at home, and I sure as hell don't want people to do it at work. Those guys have no idea about how to make a company successful." Catherine was almost too confused by the scattershot reply to respond. After a few moments, she said, "Well, we can talk about it tomorrow. I think they need to hear what you think." "Oh, I'm not saying anything tomorrow." Catherine tried not to overreact to Mickey's comment, which she attributed more to her momentary emotions than anything else. "I think you'll feel much better in the morning." "No, I'm serious. They aren't going to hear from me." Catherine decided to let it go for the moment. "Well, get a good night's sleep." They were at their rooms now. Mickey ended the conversation with a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, I will." Rebound is the next section. It's hard to get the lighting just right. Only Catherine and Jan, the next section is called Rebound again. Only Catherine and Jan were in the conference room when Mickey arrived the next morning. She seemed enthusiastic and unbowed by the previous day's events, which was a pleasant surprise for Catherine. Once the others had arrived, Catherine kicked off the session with an abbreviated version of the prior day's speech. "Okay, before we get started, I think it's good to remember why we are here. We have more cash, more experienced executives, better technology, and more connections than any of our competitors, and yet at least two of them are ahead of us in the market. Our job is to increase revenue, profitability, and customer acquisition and retention, and maybe even put ourselves into the position for an IPO. but none of this will happen if we don't function as a team. She paused, surprised at how closely her reports seemed to be listening. It was as if they were hearing it for the first time. Any questions? Instead of just sitting there, a number of the staff members shook their heads as if to say, "No questions, let's get started." At least that's how Catherine interpreted it. For the next few hours, the group reviewed the material they had covered the previous day. After an hour or so, Martin and Nick seemed to be losing a little interest, and JR had become more distracted each time his cell phone vibrated and went unanswered. Catherine decided to address their concerns before they started talking amongst themselves. "I know that you are all probably starting to wonder, didn't we do this yesterday? And I realize it's repetitive, and this stuff won't stick unless we understand how to apply it completely." For another hour, the group discussed the implications of their various style preferences and the collective opportunities and challenges that those styles created. Mickey made a few comments, and whenever she did speak, the flow of the conversation seemed to slow dramatically. Martin, too, said little, but seemed to be paying attention and followed the conversation nonetheless. By mid-morning, they had completed their review of interpersonal styles and team behaviors, and then, with less than an hour until lunch, Catherine decided to introduce the most important exercise of the day, one that she would look back on later as a moment of truth for Mickey and the rest of the team. Walking back to the whiteboard, Catherine explained, "Remember, teamwork begins with building trust, and the only way to do that is to overcome our need for invulnerability." She wrote the word invulnerability next to trust on the whiteboard. Then she continued. I'm sure the lighting is terrible, and I just don't think it matters that much. Then she continued, "And so we are all going to demonstrate vulnerability this morning in a low-risk but reluctant way." Then she asked everyone to spend 5 minutes deciding what they believed were their single biggest strength and weakness in terms of their contribution to decision tech success or failure. I don't want you to give me some generic weakness. I don't want you glossing over your strengths because you're too modest or embarrassed to tell us what you think you're really good at. Take this simple exercise seriously and be willing to put yourself out there. When it was clear that everyone had finished jotting down their notes, Catherine began the discussion. "Okay, I'll go first." She looked at her notes briefly. "I think my biggest strength, at least the strength that will have the biggest impact on our success, is my ability to see through fluffy, superfluous information and to cut to the point that matters. I have a way of eliminating unnecessary detail and getting to the heart of an issue, and that should save us a lot of time." She paused before continuing. "My weakness is that I am not the world's best external spokesperson. In fact, I'm bad at it. I tend to downplay the importance of public relations, and I'm not talented or tactful speaker when it comes to being in front of a large group, or even worse, a television camera. I'm going to need help with that if we are going to accomplish everything we hope to." With the exception of JR and Mickey, everyone was taking notes as Catherine spoke. She liked that. "Okay, who wants to go next?" No one volunteered immediately. Everyone was looking around, some hoping that one of their peers would volunteer, others seeming to ask permission to step forward. Finally, Nick broke the ice. "Okay, I'll go." "Okay, let's see." He reviewed his notes. "My biggest strength is my lack of fear when it comes to negotiation and management of outside companies, whether they're partners, vendors, or competitors. I don't have any problem pushing them to do more than they want to do. My biggest weakness, however, is that I sometimes come across as arrogant. A few of Nick's peers laughed a little nervously. He smiled and continued, Yes, I have had that problem since I was in college, and probably before. I can be sarcastic and even rude at times, and sometimes I come across as sounding like I'm smarter than everyone else. And that might be okay, I suppose, if I'm dealing with a vendor, but with you guys, I could probably piss you off a little, which I don't think is going to help us get where we want to go. Jeff commented, It sounds like your strengths and weaknesses are rooted in the same thing. Martin, to everyone's surprise, voiced his agreement. Isn't that usually the case? Heads around the table nodded. Catherine was impressed by the apparent honesty of Nick's remarks and willingness of the other staff members to make comments. She was glad he went first. Good. That's exactly what kind of thing I'm looking for. Who's next? Jan volunteered and talked about her management skills and attention to detail as strengths, and something everyone agreed with immediately. Then she admitted being more conservative about finances than the CFO of a startup should be. She explained that this was a result of her training at larger companies and her concern that her peers were not concerned enough about managing expenses. Still, I'm probably making it a lot harder for you all to meet me halfway by being so controlling. Carlos assured her that the rest of the group could probably take a step or two in her direction. Jeff went next. He struggled in his attempt to call out his amazing networking skills and ability to build partnerships with investors and partners, but Jan wouldn't let him off the hook. Come on now, Jeff. If we've done one thing well, it's been raising boatloads of money and getting investors excited about the company. Don't downplay your role in that. Jeff reluctantly accepted her kind-hearted rebuke and then blew everyone away with his admission of a weakness. I'm pretty afraid to fail, and so I tend to over-engineer things and do them myself. I don't like to tell other people what to do, which ironically only makes it more likely that I'm going to fail. For the slightest moment, Jeff seemed to fight back emotions and then recovered instantly. He was sure no one had noticed, and I think that's probably the biggest reason that we haven't succeeded and that I'm not the CEO anymore. He paused and then added quickly, which I'm okay with, really. In fact, I'm pretty happy to be out of that job. The group laughed in a supportive way. Catherine couldn't believe that the first three people to step forward had done so well. For a moment, she began to entertain hopes that that moment would continue and that the day would be a runaway hit. And then Mikey spoke. Okay, I'll go next. Unlike her peers who had gone before her, Mikey looked at her notes almost the entire time she talked. My biggest strength is my understanding of the technology market and how to communicate with analysts and the media. My biggest weakness is my poor financial skills. Silence. No comments. No questions. Nothing. Like Catherine, most everyone in the room was torn between two emotions: relief that Mickey was finished, and disappointment at the shallow nature of her response. At that moment, Catherine didn't feel that it would be right to force her vice president of marketing to be more vulnerable. Mikey had to do it herself. With every second that went by, the group quietly begged for someone to break the silence. Carlos put them out of their misery. Okay, I'll go next, doing his best to bring the quality of the conversation back to a higher level. He talked about his follow-through as a strength and his failure to update people on his progress as a weakness. After he finished, Jan jumped in. Carlos, I think you missed on both of your answers. Catherine, not knowing that Carlos and Jan had become fairly close, was surprised by the directness of her remark. Jan continued, First, as thorough as you are, your willingness to do the shit work and not complain is your strength. I know that sounds terrible, but I don't know what would happen around here if you weren't bailing us out all the time. A number of the others voiced their agreement. And on the negative side, I think that you could tell us what you're thinking more during meetings. You hold back too much. Everyone seemed to wait to see how Carlos would respond, but he just nodded his head and took a note. Okay. JR volunteered to go next and brought the room to a roar when he exclaimed, "Clearly my biggest strength is my follow-through and attention to detail." The group enjoyed laughter for a few minutes until JR continued, "Seriously, I'm pretty good at building strong personal relationships with customers. In fact, I'm really good at that." He said it modestly enough for everyone to appreciate. On the downside, if I don't think something is terribly important, which usually means it isn't going to get me closer to closing a deal, I can sometimes blow it off. Sometimes, Nick asked, and the room howled again. JR blushed. I know. I just can't seem to get around to my to-do list, and I don't know why, but I think that hurts the team. Martin was the only remaining executive. Okay, I think I'm next. He took a deep breath. I hate talking about myself this way, but I have to. I'd say that I'm good at solving problems, doing analysis, stuff like that. What I'm not so good at is communicating with human beings. He stopped. I mean, it's not that I can't do it, but I really prefer people who aren't sensitive. I like to have conversations with people on a purely intellectual level and not have to worry about what they're feeling or anything else like that. Does that make sense? Sure, said Jeff, who decided to take a risk. The problem is that it can sometimes make people think you don't like them and that they're a waste of your time. Martin seemed visibly disappointed by Jeff's remarks. No, it's not that at all. I mean, it's not what I intend. Crap, that's bad. I don't mean that at all, but I suppose I can see how it comes across that way. I don't know how to change that. For the first time all morning, Mickey chimed in, smiling. Years of psychotherapy, my friend, and even then you probably won't be able to change it. You're just an aggressive SOB. But then again, isn't every CTO in the valley? Mickey laughed. No one else did, with the exception of Martin, who seemed embarrassed by her remark and wanted to add to its sense of being humorous. Inside, he was melting. Catherine would later kick herself for not calling Mikey on her remark, which at the time Catherine attributed to her astonishingly low emotional intelligence. Whatever the case, it was clear to her now that Mickey's behavior was having a real impact on the rest of the group. When everyone had found their seats around the table, ego is the next section. When everyone had found their seats around the table, Catherine announced the change in direction. Okay, we're going to move all the way to the final dysfunction, but we'll be revisiting fear of vulnerability topic and the need for trust many, many times again over the course of the next month. If anyone isn't looking forward to that, you'd better brace yourselves. Everyone assumed she was talking to Mickey. None of them could have guessed that another member of the team was struggling as much as she was. Catherine described the next dysfunction by going to the whiteboard and writing the phrase "inattention to results" at the top of the triangle. We're going to the top of the chart now to talk about the ultimate dysfunction, the tendency of a team members to seek out individual recognition and attention at the expense of results. And I'm referring to collective results, the goals of the entire team. Nick asked, is this about ego? Well, I suppose that's part of it, Catherine. Agreed, Catherine. But I'm not saying that there's no place for ego on a team. The key is to make the collective ego greater than the individual ones. I'm not sure I understand what this has to do with results, Jeff remarked. Well, when everyone is focused on results and using those to define success, it is difficult for ego to get out of hand. No matter how good an individual on the team might be feeling about his or her situation, if the team loses, everyone loses. Catherine could see that a few of her reports were not quite with her yet, so she took another approach. I told you yesterday that my husband is a basketball coach at St. Jude's High School in Mateo. He's a damn good basketball coach, explained Nick. He's been getting job offers from colleges since I was in high school, and every year he turns them down. He's a legend. Catherine was proud of her husband and enjoyed Nick's commentary. Yeah, I suppose he is something of an anomaly, and he's certainly good at what he does. Anyways, he's all about the team. And as good as his teams are, few of his kids play ball at big colleges because, frankly, they're not all that talented. They win because they're playing team basketball, and that usually allows them to beat bigger, faster, more talented groups of players. Nick was nodding his head with the certainty of someone who had lost to St. Jude many times. Well, every once in a while, Ken, that's my husband, gets a player on his team who doesn't really care about results, or at least not the results of the team. I remember a kid a few years ago who was interested only in his own statistics, whether he received individual recognition, all league, pictures in the paper, that sort of stuff. If the team lost, he would be in a good mood as long as he was getting his points. And even when the team won, he would be unhappy if he didn't score enough. Jan was curious. What did your husband do about him? Catherine smiled, eager to tell them more about Ken. That's the interesting thing. This kid was, without a doubt, one of the most talented players on the team, but Ken benched him. The team played better without him, and he eventually quit. Harsh, remarked JR. Yeah, but he came out the next year with a very different attitude. He went to play for St. Mary's College after he graduated. He'll tell you now that it was one of the most important years of his life. Jan was still curious. Do you think most people like that can change? Catherine didn't hesitate. No, for every kid like that, there are 10 who never made it. The group seemed sobered by the definitive response, and more than one of them were thinking about Mickey at that moment. And as harshly as that may sound, Ken always says that his job is to create the best team possible, not to shepherd the careers of individual athletes. And that's how I look at my job. Jeff decided to ask the group a question. Anyone here play team sports in high school or college? Catherine wanted to stop Jeff's poll and keep the discussion moving in the direction she had planned, but she decided that a little impromptu discussion was probably valuable for the team as anything else, as long as it had something to do with teamwork. Jeff went around the room, giving every person a chance to respond to his question. Nick reported that he had played basketball in college. Carlos was a linebacker in high school. Martin proudly announced, I played football, the original kind. Soccer. He's the British guy. It's kind of funny. Everyone else chuckled at the European colleague. Mickey said she ran track in high school. When Nick questioned her, but that's an individual, she interrupted him cleverly. I ran on the relay team. Catherine reminded everyone that she was a volleyball player. Jan reported that she was a cheerleader and a member of a dance team. And if anyone here says those aren't teams, I'm going to cut your budget in half. They laughed. Jeff confessed his lack of athletic aptitude. You see, I don't understand why everyone thinks sports is the only way to learn about teamwork. I never played sports much, even as a kid, but I was in a band in high school and and college, and I think I figured out the team thing from that. Catherine saw an opportunity to regain control of the discussion. Aha, that's a good point. First of all, you can definitely learn teamwork from lots of different activities, pretty much anything that involves a group of people working together. But there is a reason that sports are so prevalent when it comes to teams. The seventh grade teacher in Catherine suddenly emerged, wanting to give her pupils a chance to answer her next question themselves. Does anyone know what that is? Like so many times in her classroom, the group seemed to have no idea. But Catherine knew that if she... somebody's pulling up, and let me see. It is my wife. Look at that. I'll keep reading a little bit more. I kind of don't want to explain myself to anybody, so since it's Caro, I'll keep going. But like so many times in her classroom, the group seemed to have no clue, but Catherine knew that if she could tolerate silence for a moment, soon enough someone would come up with the answer. This time it was Martin. The score. As usual, Martin provided the context for his answer. Provided little context for his answer. Explain, commanded Catherine, as she would have done with one of her students. Well, in most sports, there is a clear score at the end of the game, and that determines whether you succeed or failed. There is little room for ambiguity, which means there's little room for, he paused to find the right words, for subjective, interpretive, ego-driven success, if you know what I mean. I'll make sure that this really is my wife, because, I don't know, she's walking kind of strange. Yeah, it is. Look at that. Hello, beautiful wife. I'm filming a reading video. I've only got like 2 pages before this chapter's over. I'm just going to finish them real quick. He paused to find the right words. For subjective, interpretive, ego-driven success, if you know what I mean. Heads around the room nodded to say that everyone did. Wait a second, demanded JR. You're telling me that athletes don't have egos? Martin seemed at a loss, so Catherine jumped in. They have huge egos, but great athletes' egos are usually tied to a clear result. Is Kaya crying, Carol? I don't think so. Sorry, they have huge egos, but great athletes' egos are usually tied to clear results. Winning. They just want to win, more than making the all-star team, more than getting their picture in the box of Wheaties, and yes, more than making money. I'm not sure that there are many of those kinds of teens around anymore, at least not in professional sports, declared Nick. Catherine smiled. And that's the beauty. The teams that figure it out have a bigger advantage than ever before because most of their competitors are just a bunch of individuals looking out for themselves. Mickey was looking a little bored. Mikey. How would you pronounce that? Mikey?
Mikey?
Uh-huh.
That's Mikey.
It's a woman, though, so.
Michaela?
Yeah. I was calling her Mikey at first, and then I changed to Mickey because I thought that was more of a girl name. Oh, well. Mickey was looking a little bored. What does this have to do with a software company? Again, Mikey brought the conversation to a halt, but Catherine wanted to encourage her in any way she could, though she was already starting to doubt the likelihood of turning her around. Another good question. This has everything to do with us. You see, we're going to make our collective results as important as the score at a football game. We aren't going to leave any room for interpretation when it comes to our success. because that only creates the opportunity for individual ego to sneak in. Don't we already have a scoreboard? Mikey persisted. You're talking about profit? Asked Catherine. Mikey nodded and made a face as if to say, what else? Catherine continued patiently. Certainly profit is a big part of it, but I'm talking more about near-term results. If you let profit be your only guide to results, you won't be able to know how the team's doing until the season is almost over. Now I'm confused, admitted Carlos, isn't profit the only score that matters? Catherine smiled. Yeah, I'm starting to get a little too academic here. So let me make this simple. Our job is to make the results that we need to achieve so clear to everyone in this room that no one would even consider doing something purely to enhance his or her individual status or ego, because that would diminish our ability to achieve our collective goals. We would all lose. Something seemed to be catching on slightly, so Catherine pushed forward. The key, of course, is to define our goals, our results in a way that is simple enough to grasp easily and specific enough to be actionable. Profit is not actionable enough. It seems to be more closely related to what we do on a daily basis. And to that end, it needs to be more closely related to what we do on a daily basis. And to that end, let's see if we can come up with something right now. Interesting. This topic, it makes me think about a Myron Golden thought and principle. Specifically, he was talking about he doesn't set goals. He sets habits or something like that. I don't remember what it is. But he picks like consistency as like an achievable input or something like that. So that was originally what I was trying to do with this channel that I put these videos on, which was to make consistent enough videos. Decide I was going to show up in a space ever so often, however often it was that I was deciding. So I'm excited to continue reading on. But now I'm going to go spend some time with my beautiful wife in this dark, dark house and go find some snacks or something fun to do. So, alrighty.